What up, guys? My name is Chimoge. This is Chimoge's Comments, and I want to talk to you today about the Spanish Football Federation and just say that that thing is messy as who knows what. So, I'm sure most of you by now have heard of the scandal involving Spain's Women's World Cup winning team player, Jenni Hermoso, and the president of the Spanish Football Federation, Luis Rubiales during the celebration for the trophy, right? Spain had just won. And first, let me just say, sure, they won, but they're not the best team. They're not the best team. Because in women's football, the thing that makes me upset the most is that it's clearly just resources that determines who wins, right? You have because first of all the best players in women's football are black. All of them are black. Like all of them. In general, that's true, but in women's football, it's even a crazier difference, right? Because I can't think of too many white women's footballers I've seen who have any skill. They're not the best. It's just they have more money than the black teams. Sure, they don't get funded as much as the men's teams. There's a whole controversy around that, but you can't even compare them to the black teams. Look at Jamaica. They made it to the round of 16, and they had to do a GoFundMe to get there. You want to compare them to Spain, England, who don't even have that close of a problem, right? And because they have more organization, they win. But they clearly have more skill, right? They gave the ball to someone, the golden ball of the tournament to someone I don't know. Because honestly, once the black teams leave the Women's World Cup, I kind of stop watching because I'm like, this is not a proper thing, right? But Linda Caicedo of Colombia, shout out to her. Clearly, she's the best player of the tournament. Clearly, black player. Clearly. It's just that they don't have funding, so then they don't do as well. But just watch. All the white players do is play square passes. So I almost want to say it's rigged because it might as well be. But anyway, nonetheless, Spain did win. They won the tournament. And they were going up to collect their medals and lift the trophy, and during the celebration, right, the president of Spain's football federation, when he met Jenni Hermoso in the line, right, because in like all sports tournaments, the winning team, well, both teams will do it, but it just the losing team will be sad, but the winning team will come down, they'll shake hands with a bunch of people. Spain's football federation president was one of them, and when she was greeting him and talking to him at the end of their interaction, he kissed her on the lips, or um, you could say they kissed each other. We'll get into that. And then she went on. And then after the fact, even though initially she said it was no problem, she claimed the kiss was unwanted, said it was a case of harassment. And I'm just saying just because this video is going up first on YouTube. I don't think they'll allow me to fully say what kind of harassment, but or I guess you could even say assault, SA. And then she called for Rubiales to resign, and so did a bunch of her teammates who joined her. But then Rubiales, after initially apologizing, came out and said that it was consensual, and that he wouldn't step down. So now there's this big worldwide controversy. A bunch of people, even outside of the Spanish national team, Spanish club teams, and even outside of Spain, just teams in general, people in general have been calling for him to resign. He's been suspended by FIFA. But then at the same time, uh, he just has decided not to resign, and the Spanish Football Federation has backed him, right? So this is just a very complicated situation. And I say that because, even though at first I thought it was simple, initially I knew what I was going to say. I was just going to come out and say, Rubiales is a disgrace. He should resign. But when I was doing some research before this, I just realized there's just a lot going on with that Spanish Football Federation. Because first of all, just with this incident itself, um, she claimed it was not consensual. He claims it was. And then even other news outlets that I saw reported that initially she came out and said it was consensual, there was no problem, but then later changed her mind. Doesn't mean she's not telling the truth now, but it just makes like her testimony less reliable, because then you'd have to wonder, if it wasn't consensual, why did she say so at first? And then also there's video of Rubiales going into their dressing room after the win, the Spanish Women's World Cup team, and joking that he was going to take Jenni Hermoso to Ibiza and marry her. And then everyone in the team was like cheering and laughing about it, right? It didn't seem like a harassment incident. Again, maybe it was, and just for some reason they were just putting on a good act. Again, sometimes that could happen because the other weird thing about this is he is their boss. um Although again, it's even more complicated because sure, even though he's their boss in the Spanish Football Federation, they don't only work for him, right? Because they have their own club teams, the players. So the amount of power he has over them is not as straightforward as, say, someone who only works for one person, right? Even though he does have a lot of influence, they have other bosses. They, a lot of them even have club teams outside of Spain. Like even Jenni Hermoso plays in Mexico now. So it just, it's the kind of thing where knowing the exact power dynamic is hard from the outside. You really need someone who either is directly involved with the organization and like women's football in general, or maybe even specifically Spanish women's football, or just someone who really has done research, talked to people in person to know. I don't know. I think most of the public don't know. So it's hard to know off of that what the dynamic was. You could say that regardless of the exact power dynamic, even if um as long as someone is the boss of someone else, they shouldn't have a romantic relationship or any romantic contact. I can understand that. That definitely makes it a lot less messy, which is part of why I'm just saying the Spanish Football Federation is messy, because maybe a wise person would just say, you know what, kind of this person's boss, just to avoid nonsense, let me not do anything that could look romantic. That's the other thing. He's even claimed that Rubiales, that he would kiss his daughters in the same way. And even though that might be odd, I have seen individuals and cultures where a kiss on the lips is not necessarily seen as romantic, right? So, and then in general, I also know in Spain a lot it's big to kiss people on the cheek. And when you see Rubiales' interactions with the other players before and after Hermoso, really the only difference is that he kissed her on the lips, but he was kissing all the other ones on the cheek, hugging them. But then later, I've seen some people try and describe that as harassment too, and it's like it's just hard to know if you're not in that context, right? From outside looking in, it seems very complicated. Um, so I don't know. But then even again, you already see even judging that simple interaction is hard. But then when you look at all else going on in that Spanish Football Federation, you're just kind of like, what on earth is going on, right? Because just to name the big things that came up in my research. One, Rubiales has been accused of harassing a couple other women, right? One who was his secretary, and another who was like doing construction work for him. So, I won't say three accusations definitely means you're guilty, but that seems like maybe he has a track record. Then also, he's been accused of um, YouTube won't let me just say what it is. He's been accused of having how do you even say this without saying what it is? Having group fun, let's say that, with underage women. He's been accused of that. Um he's also been accused of just being corrupt, diverting, just taking money from the Spanish Football Federation. What was diverting? Taking their money, using it for his own purposes, including that group fund. Um, he's been accused of nepotism, like hiring his family members and girlfriends for positions they weren't necessarily qualified for, at least giving them a boost, like hiring them like maybe they were qualified, but so are other people, that kind of thing. So, he has a lot around him. And then the biggest accusation, which goes into some bigger things, is that he had a very close relationship with Gerard Piqué, who, for those of you who don't know, is a former Spanish soccer player, professional soccer player, legend of the game, who also is very influential off the pitch, right? He has a lot of connections. and apparently he was doing a lot of favors for him. PK was involved with negotiations for um, uh, maybe contracts is not the right word, but from what I remember, just certain deals they were doing, he was involved. Like, for example, getting the Spanish Super Cup to go to Saudi Arabia. There was some audio linked of PK begging Rubiales to do it, and eventually they did it. Also, like,